Hello, I'm very pleased to have with me in the studio here today Jenny Agutter. Now before we talk about your latest film, I'd like to look at your early career in film. How in fact did it all start? I understand you started at quite an early age.
Yes, I was very young. I was 11 when I made my first film.
Yeah.
And it actually started quite by accident. I was at a ballet school, and the reason I was at a ballet school was my parents were abroad, and I was either going to go to a very academic school or this ballet school, and they felt that if I was going to be away from home, I might as well be doing something I really enjoyed, and that was dancing. And I'd shown promise when I was about 8 as a tot, going around being butterflies and giants and things. And so I went to this ballet school, Elmhurst in Camberley, and that was at the age of 9 or something. When I was 11, Walt Disney was making a film called The Royal Danish, actually it's called Ballerina, it was about the Royal Danish Ballet. And he was screen testing a lot of girls from various ballet schools, and I was sent up for the role. And the first thing my parents knew was they were sent a telegram saying, "Do you mind if Jenny screen tests? Not to worry, she probably won't get it, not the Nordic type," because I'm not really obviously a Nordic type. And I went up for the role and screen tested and got the part. And that was really because of the dancing. And I didn't take it very seriously, obviously, being 11 years old. I thought it was fun. And whilst I was going up for that role, I was then offered another role. Quite the reverse. I was then offered the part of an Arab girl in a film called East of Sudan, which was totally shot at Shepperton Studios and didn't touch any of the Sudan at all. And I enjoyed it childishly, in as much as I liked the life. I thought that was great fun to be amongst this group of people. It was great fun to go away from school for a while, although one had to have tutors and things, obviously, and chaperones. It didn't actually interfere that much with my schoolwork. But I did those films, as I say, when I was 11. And I did things off and on, right up to the age that I left school, which is when I did Walkabout, Row with Children, and I start counting all in a row.
At what point in your life did you really decide that filmmaking was the career for you?
Well, what happened was I always knew that I would never be a dancer, although the school that I was at promoted my dancing more than they did the acting. I was never given any acting parts at school. I used to stand on stage very timidly, and I could hardly remember lines or speak loudly at all. And so everybody thought I was going to be a dancer, although I had no dedication, real dedication to it. I love it and I love to watch it, but there's too much pain involved. I couldn't let my toes bleed every night without feeling that it was ridiculous for me. So when I was around about 14, that was a time where I actually had to say, well, either I'm going to give up acting and dedicate myself, or get on with my schoolwork or whatever, because obviously at that time you're doing syllabus for O-levels, and also because if you're dancing, you can't spend time away because you have to physically be in such shape that you have to do it every day. So at 14 I was saying, well, no. For one thing I would like to do, I thought at that age that I wanted to act. And this is, remember, it's rather tentative because at 14, you know, there are still many options coming to you. But I had a feeling that I enjoyed the life of acting. It was a very open one, and it was one that I could go on and learn about different things and enjoy, well, obviously travel all over the world and therefore discover different types of people, and it seemed like a learning experience in a way. And I guess in some ways my parents felt that they must have been worried about the education, although they weren't too worried, perhaps because I was a girl. You know, I would be all right, I'd find something to do. And my decision was, if there was a film role, I would do it. You know, if anything came up during that syllabus time, I would rather do it and perhaps carry on in the film industry, and therefore it seemed to me more important to have the experience of acting than perhaps to have got my certificates, then gone to drama school, and then start again. Because, as anyone knows that has gone into acting, it's extremely difficult to get started. And in fact, I'm very happy to have made that decision, because I don't think I'd ever have gone back to it afterwards. So it would have been too much of a break. So I came out of school having made the decision when I was 14 that that was possibly going to be my career. But remembering I came out of school, actually, when I was 17, without really any training in drama at all.
So the film that really established you was The Row with Children, for which you were for the Variety Club Award.
Right.
And then you did some work in television, an
Well,
Emmy.
yes, because the trouble was, being 17, any films that were going to come along were going to be adolescent films.
Yeah.
And it seemed obvious at that age that what I ought to be doing was some theatre. And so I went, I did some television, and then at 18 I started doing some theatre work. And for the next 3 years I did theatre. The first theatrical production I did was a play at Farnham Repertory Company, and I played Lady Teasdale in School for Scandal, which was terrible. And I didn't get I mean, it's comedy, right? Not one laugh.
Really?
For the whole run. It was just really awful. And I thought, never again, this isn't for me, this isn't going to work. But I was offered another play, which was at Hampstead Theatre Club, and it was about some Australian people. And having been to Australia doing Walkabout, I thought it was very funny because I recognised the people and the situations. And it was contemporary, and I thought, well, I might as well give it another go. And I did that, and it worked. I think one of the major reasons it worked was a lot of Australian people would come and see us and laugh the minute you mentioned Foster's Lager, which is terrific. It was great for the ego, you know, particularly on stage. You need to have a boost. And from that I did Arms and the Man with Tom Courtenay. And I think then I started, you know, when you work with really good people on stage, my ambition started to change at that point. I realised that all of the way I'd viewed my work as a child had been with, you know, it was magic filmmaking, but it wasn't really a career. And I had no real aspirations as to what I could do as an actress. Suddenly, starting to work with Courtenay and really good people, I saw what the demand was, and I realised, well, this is something I'd really like to, this is something I can aspire to and would like to learn about, and it was just exciting. And after that I went to the National and worked with Sir John Gielgud, who played Prospero, and I played Miranda, and there was Cyril Cusack there and Dennis Quillian and various people who were great to watch and learn from.
But I suppose the major then turning point in your life was the move to Los Angeles when you were about 22, I believe. What exactly made you move to the States?
Well, what happened was I'd done this 3 years of theatre, in fact ending up at the National, and I had a yearning to get back to film. And against a lot of people's advice, you know, in many ways I can look back at it and say, well, maybe I should have been more serious and stuck out at doing some Shakespeare and gone out to various repertory companies and really worked at it, which, you know, I see people doing here and I admire it very much. But my first experience, again, of acting was in film, and something made me want to get back to film again. The thing about film is that many times it's a compromise, and many times you make a film and it doesn't work out the way you think, and therefore it's not very satisfying. But every so often it really works, and I look forward to that possibility. And I went to Los Angeles. I was actually 21, and I went there partly to find film work, because I felt that there was much more happening there, and partly just to get away somewhere where I was on my own, because I felt constrained by being in England. You know, I was surrounded by everything that was familiar, and I felt as though I was expected to be a particular way, which was that in film I was expected to be a railway child or something, or a teenager in some way. And I could have gone on with theatre, but I just felt like breaking out of that and doing something different.
What did you find was principal differences between life in LA and life in London, for example?
The principal, well, I mean, you say things like sunshine.
Yeah. Is it more enjoyable, do you find?
No, it's very different. Remembering that London is a city, and there's no way that you can classify Los Angeles as a city. Someone described it once as being 7 suburbs in search of a city. And it has many different identities. You have Beverly Hills, which is very different from Hollywood and West Hollywood and people that live at the beach. And all of these environments are different from one another. It's therefore possible to choose any sort of lifestyle that you like. I mean, literally everything's available in LA. Therefore, you really have to make up your mind about how you want to live. I always view it as being a desert, and you pitch your tent and you put up the things that you like and hang the carpets you like. And you make your own way in your own life there, and you pick your own friends. And I think that's very important to remember there, because a lot of people go there in search of something. They want something from the place itself, and it doesn't have it has everything to offer, but it doesn't have one. You know, you don't feel one essence there. And that was, in some way, that was good for me, because as I say, it was a place that nothing was imposed, and therefore I had to. I mean, it sounds a cliche, but I had to find myself. I was actually standing up on my own 2 feet, looking around to see what it was I wanted to do.
Presumably, did you have to do a lot of work to get film parts? Did this involve going around to lots of social functions and getting known?
In a way, it does more than it did at that time. I went there very naively, with no idea of quite what I was going to do, and not in any sort of social scene of you know, meeting people in the film industry. And I could have, I mean, just stayed there, boiled my brains, and nothing would have happened. Now, looking at it, I realise that it's a very competitive place. There are a lot of people, you know, that turn up in Los Angeles looking for film work. And I was just very lucky, because in the first few months that I was there, Michael Anderson was making a film called Logan's Run. And he's an English director, although he's done a lot of films in America. And he'd already cast Michael Anderson. Michael Anderson had cast Michael York and Peter Ustinov, both English people, and this is actually an American film. And he needed someone to play opposite Michael York. And I think it was very late in casting, and I think he'd gone through screen tests with a lot of American girls and not found a good balance. And my agent suggested I went to see him. He said, no, Railway Children, I've seen her. She's not right, she's too young. This is 6 years later. So that's the sort of thing you're up against in film a lot of the time. And she said, well, no, it is 6 years. You do see her, she is here. So I went to see him, and he was surprised that I'd grown up. Screen tested me, and I got that role. But I mean, it really is, it was a matter of luck that came up, because I could have sat around for a long time. And that film led into Eagle Has Landed, and then Equus.
About it, of course, for Equus you got a British Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Did that give you the most pleasure? Obviously that film must have had something special for you. It's something special. It
was in a lot of different ways. Lumet is a very exciting director to work with. He films quite differently than you normally do. He spends a long time rehearsing. I mean, it literally is like doing a play. Also, mind you, Equus was a play first, and therefore you have the form to work with, and you could rehearse it like a play. It was feasible to go into a rehearsal room and work everything out. And we spent 3, almost 4 weeks rehearsing it. And then he's a director that is constantly giving you ideas. One of the things about film is that the more information you have, I think, the more there is to sustain a performance or a film, you know, underneath. People tend to think that it's very blank moments in a way, you know, and the audience fill in. I tend not to think so. I think the audience are paying a lot of money. There should be a lot there. There should be a lot of information. There should be a lot going on. And Lumet was constantly coming up with different ideas for scenes, different thoughts that were behind it, different emotional ideas and shapes. And so he was very exciting. I mean, that was a reward in itself, just doing that piece. And I think it was although it wasn't a large role, it was a very good, strong role.
I'd like now to look at your latest film, An American Werewolf in London. How actually did you get the part? Did you meet John Landis at a party, or what?
No, I met Landis through a friend about 5 years ago. And this is before he made Kentucky Fried Movie and Blues Brothers and Animal House. In fact, he was just about to start Kentucky Fried Movie. And he was talking about this film that he'd always wanted to make, which was American Werewolf. And he sort of talked about the story then. But it didn't seem like anything that was actually going to happen. And then about a year ago, it started up again. He said he was definitely going to make it. By this time, he'd made the other films, and it was feasible that he would get the money. Because he wanted to make it privately, and it also wasn't a large budget film. And I went, yes, yes. And he told me the story, and it sounded really quite crazy. And I thought, there's no way this film's going to work at all. And then last November, he sent me the script that he'd written. And I was extremely impressed, because I thought it was very funny. And I recognized also that it was funny also because I knew him, and I recognized all of the characters being in some way partly him. I also thought he had drawn the characters very well and very honestly. And it was also frightening. And then he said, well, you know, do you want to play the role? I said, terrific.
I wonder whether you could give us a brief rundown of the general storyline for Werewolf. I'm sure the Imperial College audience would much rather hear it coming from you.
Okay. What happens, it opens with 2 young American men who are hitchhiking across the moors. And then the next thing you know, one of them is woken up in the hospital, badly injured, and is being told that his friend has been killed. I play a nurse in the hospital who looks after him and gets rather attached to this strange young American gentleman, who is then visited by his friend, who is dead in a state of decay. He tells me, of course, I don't believe him, and then it develops from there to where he believes that he's a werewolf.
Now, I understand in the film some of the parts are quite horrific, for example, involving decaying bodies all over the place. Now, were you actually involved in any of the gory parts of the film?
No, I think one of the things that did attract me, because I had been asked, you know, am I interested in horror films? Well, I am if they're good, but not necessarily as roles, particularly as, you know, women's roles in horror movies tend to be, all you do is exercise your vocal cords. You're running and screaming and hiding in the shadows somewhere. In this, my role is just purely that of the nurse, falling in love with this young, rather engaging American gentleman who thinks he's a werewolf, and the relationship with him. And then the only time I get involved is at the very end, when you realize what has happened. The point of the film in some ways is that it's funny because of its reality, because it is contemporary, and because this person is saying they're a werewolf now. You spend all your time laughing at it. But then it's like us telling stories, ghost stories, you know, and you, in some way, you laugh at them because you know that it's not real. But one part of your mind is always going, yes, it's feasible and possible, and you're frightened by it. But no, I'm not involved in the gore, but it's still scary on another, you know, do you see both sides?
How did you find John Landis as a director to work with? How did he compare with, for example, other directors you've been involved with in the past?
Landis is very vital, and he works in a very particular way. He brings his enthusiasm. He knows a great deal about film, and he brings his enthusiasm to the set. And usually on film, what tends to happen is that in between scenes, people get very slow, and everything slows down, and it takes an hour to put the lights up, and everything quietens down, and by the time you come to do the scene, it's very, very flat. Well, Landis never allows that to happen. Everything moves along very fast. He's constantly talking about film or telling stories and joking, and so when you go into actually play, there's this very high energy. He also often keeps cameras rolling, which is that normally you'll play a scene and they go cut, and then you go, oh, well, that didn't work, we'll do this and change it. Well, I was very shocked the first day of filming, because instead of saying cut, he went, carry on now, we'll say, like, start again at this point, and you're thrown right into the scene again without having a chance to think about it, which actually makes one, you have to be real. There's no way that you can try and, you know, do things and work it out. It just is whatever happens. And I think that's what he catches, is spontaneity.
One part of an actor or actress's life we don't tend to hear about is the actual promotional work that goes on during a film's release, like we're doing now, for example. Has this last week been very hectic for you?
Yes, because it usually is condensed into a small span of time, because it's only going to be a week in which people are interested because the film is suddenly coming out and the press all have to do their interviews at once. And it's peculiar because, I mean, there's nothing more comfortable than playing with a role and finding out about it and going in each day. It's very ordered, and I enjoy that. Whereas suddenly one's asked to present oneself. And most actors are quite shy. I mean, you sort of get over it. But, you know, and you're asked to talk about yourself and explain things and why you do it. And most of the time you don't know why, really. And it can be quite draining, and it's hard work. It's harder work doing promotion in the film.
Really?
Yes.
Well, as regards your future, have you got anything definite lined up?
Well, the only thing that's definite right now is when I finish on Saturday and the film is out, I will go back to Los Angeles, and I'm going to do Desdemona in a production of Othello, which is being filmed for cable. In America, there's a huge expanding cable television, which I think is very good, but I don't know why they've decided to do all the Shakespeares, having got all the ones from England, but you know, there are many interpretations of Shakespeare, so I'll be doing that.
Will you see this in Britain eventually?
I don't know. I mean, it will be sold to whoever wants the programmes, but somehow I doubt it. I don't know.
And have you got any film roles lined up?
No.
No film? No.
No film roles. What I would like to do is do some theatre again. The last theatre I did was a year ago at the Roundhouse doing Hedda, and I'd like to do some theatre here again. So that's what I will be looking for more than anything else.
Here in London?
Yes.
Well, I for one will look forward to seeing you there. Jenny Agutter, thank you very much indeed for coming on to Stoic. Thank you.
Thank you.